Crystal told me about this TV. I've never seen this TV show, but I understand there's one called Wife Swap. How many of you have seen the TV show Wife Swap? Where they take two families. One of them is all rich and comfortable with a nice big house, and another one's a working class family that that has to struggle to make ends meet. And they take the wives and they swap them, And then one of the wife who has to go from the rich house to the working class house, she's just convinced that she has to suffer so much because she has to clean a toilet. When she's used to having her maid do that. Oh, this is such suffering. Whereas the wife in the poor house, in the working class house, she just sees it, well, that's just life. That's just what you do. It isn't suffering. It's just life. You see, it has to do with your understanding of what you're going through, not so much just the distress or the work or whatever itself. There's I don't know how many of you remember this. When I was a kid, there was a TV show called Lost in Space. Do you remember the movie, the TV show Lost in Space? And there was this one character nobody liked him. He was called Dr. Smith. Do you remember Dr. Smith, played by Jonathan Harris? And Dr. Smith was devious and selfish and lazy, and there would be a scene where he'd say, "Oh, it's time for me to do my morning calisthenics," and he'd stand there and he'd do this about 3 times. And then he'd go, "Oh, I'm exhausted," and have to lean against something. Because he saw himself as he was just suffering so much, because he interpreted whatever strain he had to experience as a kind of punishment, see? So he had to go through his life feeling sorry for himself, being resentful and depressed because he understood what he was going through as suffering. But if you don't even recognize punishment as a category, if you don't even think about punishment as actually having any reality to it, if you're free of any notion of punishment, all of a sudden your pain takes on a new meaning and it becomes vastly more endurable. And so maybe, and this may be, maybe I'm going too far when I say this, I don't know, but it may be possible that when that criminal saw the truth about what was going on that day when he was with Jesus on the cross, maybe he was released from suffering because he was released from the lie of punishment. I don't know. Certainly it's a lot of pain to be hanging on a cross, and I don't want to minimize it. But there is something about the meaning of suffering. And Jesus agrees to suffer for us. When he agrees to go through great pain for us, it may be that he's able to do that because he recognizes something that we don't see, and that is that punishment is a lie. And that if you go through pain and struggle for God, as a way of glorifying God and as a way of setting people free and as a kind of vocation and calling for your own life, maybe it makes it possible to endure more pain than you ever could have imagined. Maybe there is even a kind of paradise in that, because in it there is a freedom that nobody else knows. So what does this tell us as the subjects of the King, Jesus Christ? What does it tell us to do and be? I think what it tells us to do and be is simply to think what it's like to be that criminal who's hanging on the cross and recognizing what's really going on. The crowd is guilty and Jesus is innocent. Maybe it calls us to imagine what it's like to be in that situation, to be the fat kid on the playground that all the other kids are picking on, to be the black guy in the midst of the white crowd that's screaming for his death, to be even the criminal or the child molester in our society where everybody wants that person punished. When everyone agrees that someone ought to be punished, maybe that's time for us to think again that there might be a sin happening in the crowd that is at least as great as the sin committed by the one whom the crowd is against. And maybe if we practice imagining being in that position from time to time, we'll be more compassionate toward sinners, even as God is compassionate toward sinners like us.